Okay, good afternoon, folks. Happy 2026 and our first Master Gardener series of the year. We have Rebecca Flato here. Um, and as always, please submit all your questions via chat under Ask Questions Here. Can with Linkso, and I will read your questions to Rebecca towards the end of her talk, and we'll address most, if not all, questions. So, welcome. Without further ado, the floor is all yours. Take it away.
Thanks so much, Can. Yeah, so my name is Rebecca Flato, and I am a UC Master Gardener volunteer. I'm kind of a newish Master Gardener, but it's been a great experience, and I really encourage anybody who's watching to utilize our resources. We are trained by the University of California system to be able to volunteer in the community and help give guidance on best gardening practices and how one can. Um, so, is there something? Um, and how we can um, be stewards in the community. Um, Sorry, I'm just gonna chat somebody really quickly. I'm having a little bit of an issue with my video. Um, Give me 1 second. So anyway, the UC Master Gardener program is an amazing program that can provide you with all kinds of fun gardening information, and I'll give more links to how you can access us and how you can ask us questions at the end of the talk. Um, My name is Rebecca, and I am a designer and consultant. And I really focus on habitats and landscape gardening that brings together and works with our local environments and brings our local native California habitat to life. So, with that, I will start with how to bring your shade garden to life. Um, I think one of the biggest hurdles that people think about when they think about shade gardening is they really see it as a huge limitation, a huge impediment. My neighbor is constantly coming over and complaining, "Oh, I have a fence. Nothing will grow there. We don't get any light. Absolutely nothing is going to happen." And what I always say to people is learn to embrace the space and love your shady areas because they can be some of the most fulfilling and rewarding and beautiful spaces in your garden if you learn how to utilize them and bring in the plants that are appropriate for that space. So, what is shade? So, when you go to the nursery, you're probably going to see a lot of terms like full sun, part shade, shade. What does it mean? So, to be considered full sun, your space has to get 6+ hours of full sunlight direct. This is not dappled, this is not foggy or cloudy sunlight. This is full direct sunlight. A minimum of 6 hours is considered full sun. So if you're getting less than that, you may be part sun. So 3 to 6 hours, but you're getting afternoon sun, which is hotter and typically stronger. That would be considered part sun. Part shade is when you're getting 3 to 6 hours of sun a day, but it's only going to be morning light. So that's a little bit less intense. So the plants are getting a little bit less sunlight than they would a part sun. And a full shade is when you're getting less than 3 hours of sunlight. So if you have an area that's maybe under trees and you're really getting that dappled light for most of the day, that's probably a full shade area. So that's something to consider when you're planting in that area. The other question that we get a lot when we're talking about sun and shade planting is the equinoxes, right? So we all know in the winter we're getting a lot less sun than we are in the summer. And I have a fun little example here of just showing how those equinoxes really change the way that we look at shade and how it affects our garden. So what I tell people, because they're like, well, in the winter, I get only 3 hours, but then in the summer, I get this much. Usually, you want to take the average of all of those times. So if you look at the average overall sunlight that you're getting in one area throughout the year, that's how you can decide which one of these groups your plants might fall in. And one of the master gardeners that we worked together on a project, found this wonderful website called Shade Map, which I recommend to everybody. If you're a little bit nervous, maybe you live in a city or you have trees and you want to see how much shade you're getting throughout the year, you can type in your address, and you can drag and drop throughout the year and throughout the day to really get an idea of how much shade that you're getting. So it's really interactive and it's a really great way for you to figure out exactly how much sunlight and get a better idea of your average. Say if you have a big tall apartment building next to you or even just a neighbor's big house next to you, you can see here how the shade affects your area throughout different times of the day and throughout the year. The other factors that you can consider in your shady area are soil, moisture, your environmental factors, so your hardiness zone, your physical constraints, if there are any building codes or permit codes in your area, and maintenance requirements. So a lot of people want something low maintenance, that's something to consider. Um, or, they really want to get excited about certain plants and they want something that they can, really kind of baby, and that's a lot of fun too. Um, the environmental factors and physical constraints and maintenance requirements are all kind of at your discretion. But I will go over a little bit how to figure out what kind of soil you have and what your moisture elements are so that you can really select the right plants for your location. So, soil is generally built of sand, clay, and silt. And this is going to be one of the other big things that you're going to need to look at when you're selecting the plants for your shady area. A lot of shady areas tend to hold more moisture because they're not getting as much sun that's evaporating the water out of the soil. But also, I find that they tend to, oddly enough, have more of like a clay to them for whatever reason. Um, there's some really great, I've put some links down here at the bottom to a couple of um, Master Gardener program specific testing directions. So if you go here to UC Master Gardener Program, Soil Property Characteristics, it will take you through how to look at your soil, how to assess your soil, so you can figure out where in this spectrum do you have clay soil, do you have silty loam, do you have sandy loam, um, and figuring out where you are in this is going to help you select the right plants that are going to work in your area. The Marin Master Gardener soil also has some great information here. Um, a really easy test to do, I've put some photos here on the right, is kind of the hand test. So if you take a bit of clay, you're going to ball it up, and you can see here is a sandier version of clay. You can actually see the particles in it. They're a bit larger, whereas clay is going to hold together like pottery, right? Like clay. So you see those differences, and you can tell that one is going to hold moisture a lot better than the other, which I'll get to in the next slide about moisture and drainage. The reason that sand, silt, and clay is so important to know about, not only because they kind of have different mineralities to them, but also because they hold moisture very differently. So sand, as you can um, so the easiest way to quick and easy way to figure out what kind of moisture and drainage you have is to dig a 1 foot by 1 foot square hole in your area, fill it with water, allow it to drain, refill the pit, and measure the depth of water with a ruler. 15 minutes later, you can see how quickly it drops in an hour. So you're going to multiply that by 4 to calculate how much it drops in an hour. If you have less than 1 inch of a drop per hour, which is pretty rare, you have really poor drainage. So you have very high clay soil, and that's something to think about. If between 1 inch and 6 inch an hour is considered well draining. So when you're looking at plants that say they need well draining soil, this is what it means. And if you have more than 6 inches in an hour, that's excessive drainage, which means you probably have sandy soil. So you want to look at plants that tolerate sand. Okay, so you've done your due diligence, you've figured out how much sunlight you get, you've figured out what kind of soil you have, you know how much moisture you need. Now, what do you do? Okay, now it's the fun part. You've assessed your space and now you can start thinking about what you really want to bring into your space and how you want to embrace that area and how you want to feel when you're in that space. So, um, you can have a lot of fun in shade gardens, but one thing I always like to remind people is when you're looking at plants and you want to think about what you want to bring together in that space, the first thing you want to think about is the base color, which is your greens that are in your space. So green is really the color that's going to be there all year. Flowers come and go. We all love flowers. They're all great. They're all colorful. But for the most part, your plants are going to be green for most of the year. They're not going to be flowering 365 days a year. So you want to think about bringing plants that are going to work together and fit nicely in a color palette. So here I have examples of different types of greens. You know, we kind of look at a field and we just see like a sea of green and we're just like everything's green, but it's really not. Wet greens tend to be a little bit more yellow. Moist greens tend to have a little bit more red, and those dry, deserty greens tend to have that silvery blue color to them. And without realizing it, when we see those colors, we immediately imagine ourselves in those spaces. When we see a blue silver garden, we immediately imagine ourselves in a desert or in the Mediterranean. When we see a lot of yellow, we immediately imagine ourselves in a tropical space. So when you're thinking about those things and what you like and what you want in your garden, think about those green elements that you want to bring in to make you feel like you're in a specific area. So I've put together a few shade colors that you can look at here. So on the left, these are all ferns, but all of the ferns have kind of different undertones to them that make them feel really different and make each space feel really different. So on the left, we have bright yellow greens that are kind of vibrant, high energy. In the middle, we have those deep fern greens that are really giving you that rich, sort of hidden, mysterious feel. And on the right, we have kind of the mid-tone greens that make you feel a little bit more cottagey, a little bit more homey. So when you're selecting plants, and you know which plants you need for your area, then you can start to think about what colors and what elements you want to bring in. Then we can start to think about more other colors that are really going to layer on top of these base greens. So hot are those reds, those really bright, rich colors. Cool colors are going to be your blues, your purples. They're going to give you a different feeling. Earthy colors are going to give you a really kind of cottagey feeling. Same with sweet colors, you know, your pinks, your lavenders, your yellows. And then some people really like a mix of lots of bold colors and they want their space to feel really eclectic, right? Um, so here are a few examples of some shade plants and kind of across the spectrum. So you can get the fun thing about shade plants is that they come in a lot of really unique colors that don't work in the sun. Like you can get a lot of really fun purples. You can get a lot of like really interesting reds. You can get unusual things like green flowers and hellebores that you can't put in the sun. And so you can get, you know, like a really rich royal purples, some cottagey tones, some hot colors, some earthy colors. So have fun with it and you're really going to enjoy your space. The other thing I encourage people to focus on in a shade garden is thinking about form. Obviously, these are, you know, really these flowers are meant for sun. Echinacea is meant for sun. But here you can see how we have two things that are the same color, but when you put two different forms against each other, they can really pop and create visual excitement and excitement in your yard. So this kind of has this umbrella form, and put with this sort of round globe form, when they contrast together, they create, even though they're the same color, the fact that they're the same shape, a different shape, means that they pop and contrast with each other. So shade plants are a great place to use this kind of contrast of form to bring things to life and show variety and give your space a lot of texture and visual interest. So here we have um, various oblong leaf shapes, but they're slightly different colors and they're slightly different sizes, so they all interact nicely with each other. Here we have different kind of palmate styles and fern styles. And again, because they're different shapes, they pop and contrast with each other and really bring the space to life as opposed to just having all of one texture or having different colors and mismatching. So once you've kind of thought about what's going to fit in your space, how you want to feel in your space, what colors you really like, um, where your textures might be, where your colors might be, um, then you can kind of start to think about how you want to bring it together and create an overall space that you want to be in. And this is where I think there's a little bit of a hurdle for people when they're thinking of shade gardens. They tend to see them as, oh, it's just all green, you know, it's all ferns, it's kind of boring. I can't really do anything exciting if there's not sun. But there's so many historical examples of shade gardens and so many exciting things that you can do. You can even grow edibles if you want, which we'll go through at the end. But I put a few examples here of just some ideas that you can think about and some things that you might want to bring into your garden, just to give you some ideas of the wide range of possibilities that there are in shade. One that I always encourage people is consider a habitat garden. A shady area is a perfect place for a habitat garden, and there's a lot that you can do to make it really interesting and vibrant. It's a great place for a serenity or a tranquility garden, something that you can kind of sit in and contemplate and read. And it's also a place, if you really love color, to bring in really exciting, unique colors that you can't do in other places in your garden. And finally, uh, you can grow edibles. If you love to grow vegetables and you live in San Francisco, you can do it. There are things that'll grow. So don't be afraid. Learn to embrace the space, and you're going to create something really beautiful. So if you, for example, want to create a habitat garden, I always encourage this. It's great for children. They can be low maintenance. They provide a lot of seasonal interest because you can plant things that attract different birds, different butterflies that flower at different times so that there's constant change in your garden and you really get that sense of nature. So every season, there's something new to look at, there's some excitement in the garden, there's changes, and they can be really low maintenance and a great way to educate kids on our local environment, on our native ecology. And if this is something that you want to do, there are a few recommendations that I have. One is focus on California natives because they tend to attract wildlife, and they're also some of the easiest to put in your space if you want something that's a little bit more low maintenance, because they're adapted to grow here. They tend to be low water. They'll tolerate drought in the summer. They'll tolerate our heavy water in the winter. So they can be a little bit easier depending on what you get. But try to aim for about 70% native plants minimum to 30 non-native plants if you want to bring in some fun, roses or hellebores or whatever it might be. Um, that's usually a good number. Um, Another great thing you can do is a shade area is a perfect place to provide a water source for birds. They actually don't like their water sources out in the sun. I feel like a lot of people put their bird baths like in the middle of the garden in the sun, and it's actually not where birds want to have their water. They want it kind of under a shade where they feel protected, low to the ground, so they know they're away from predators. So a shaded area is a perfect place to have a little water source or a bird bath, as long as you're keeping it clean. The other thing I also recommend, and this kind of goes in with the low maintenance aspect of it, is if you want to create a real habitat garden, you don't want to over prune, you don't want to weed too much or rake too much or otherwise disturb the soil. Because a lot of insects and things like, caterpillars that turn into beautiful butterflies in the spring, they need that soil undisturbed, and that's where they kind of hibernate over the winter, if you will. So keeping things kind of undisturbed, pruning as needed to keep things looking a little bit tidy, but you don't need to over prune. You don't need to keep it super formal or super tidy. That's kind of what the animals like, and that's kind of where they thrive. Um, I also recommend leaving the leaves is something that you may have heard of. If you are lucky enough to have a beautiful oak tree, for example, oak trees are one of California's keystone plants. They literally support, I think, 152 types of caterpillars, moths, butterflies, all kinds of things. But all of those things need the leaves so that they can, again, hibernate over the winter and then come up in, autumn or summer or spring or, whenever their life cycle is. And again, that almost makes it easier. If you want, you can kind of rake them together to be a little bit tidier. But, you know, leaving those and kind of letting nature take its course, can also look really beautiful, I think. The other thing we recommend, and this is not just for habitat gardens, this is a master gardener recommended for your soil health, is chop and drop instead of weeding. So this is really cutting weeds at the base as opposed to pulling out by the root, because that can really disturb soil health. And when you chop and drop, you kind of let all of those things decompose back into the soil and naturally keep your soil's health. Um, the other thing that's really important is having plants of various heights. So birds, they want to be able to jump to different heights in your garden, again, to avoid predators or whatever it might be. So you want a good mix of trees, shrubs, and perennials. Um, and that will allow them an easy way to move around your garden, feeling protected. And it also gives them a variety of food for the most part. The other thing that is recommended for habitat gardens specifically is a maximum of 2 inches of mulch. Usually we recommend 4 inches of mulch if it's, you know, out in the sun and it's somewhere that you're not really focusing on habitat because that's really going to help keep the moisture in your soil and keep your soil healthy. But if you have a habitat garden, you do want to keep it to 2 inches because insects won't be able, that are hibernating in the soil, will not be able to move through 4 inches of mulch when they need to come out in the spring. So that's one thing to keep in mind. And then focus on some keystone plants. I have a few in the next couple of slides, but there are some really high value plants that will give you a lot of bang for your buck as far as visuals, as far as attracting pollinators or birds or hummingbirds or whatever it is that you want to attract. And there's so much information out there now on how to do that. So I put a few here. Um, if I always like to plug calscape.org, it's a fabulous website where you can find native plants local to your area. So I typed in the Lingso zip code and I found a few things that are really high value, that are really showy, that all work for shade to deep shade and are all of various heights. There's literally tons of things that you can find in every color and every shape. You know, Douglas iris comes in lots of different colors now. The kind of original is the purple Douglas iris, but you can get yellow, you can get white. Um, Broadleaf lupine, same thing. I always love snowberry for a shady area. It can kind of be trained if you want over like a pergola that you have in a shady area. And it creates these really pretty flowers in the fall that become white berries over Christmas that look so beautiful. And they really add to that like winter vibe. And they're great food for birds. They're absolutely love, go nuts for these. Ocean spray, another great one, a great pollinator plant, creates these really beautiful white, showy flowers that sort of, go crazy and fall everywhere. Bleeding heart. Um, oops. Various hedge nettles in different colors. Western chokecherry is another great food source. Blue elderberry, great food source for birds and also edible for humans. So blue elderberry was one of a big part of indigenous food sources. You can actually fry the flower. I've never done it personally, but you can fry the flowers like you would like tempura almost. And apparently it's really delicious. You can also eat the berries. They're very good. And we use them in medicinal purposes as well as immune support. So all kinds of really, really fun things that you can do with native plants. Here, I just have like a very quick, high level general list of things that will work in shade. Oaks, if you have the space, manzanitas, ceanothus, yarrow, western houndstooth, which I love. It's beautiful. It creates these beautiful blue flowers. California buckeye, alders, serviceberry, coyote bush, which comes in now many different sizes and shapes. So if you want like a small 3-foot coyote bush, they are available at various certain nurseries. And they create really nice white flowers in the late fall, winter. So they can be a really beautiful addition. Oregon grape, yerba buena, woodland strawberry is a great ground cover. It tolerates a variety of soils, clay. Miner's lettuce is a lot of fun. It's edible and it's very good. Easy to grow. It is an annual, so it won't be there all year, but it's a lovely thing to have. Monkey flower is a great for pollinators. And monkey flower comes in all different colors now as well, reds, pinks, yellows, whatever you want, and they do tolerate shade relatively well. Clematis. Which has really beautiful white flowers. There's a list at the California Native Plant Society, yerbabuena.org, that has an incredibly comprehensive list and notes the soil for all kinds of California native plants. So it's pretty good. I have the link here, but you can go to yourself. It's like 3 pages long, It has deep shade that thrives without any sun ever, ground cover, ferns, grasses, and it has plants listed by what soil they tolerate as well, which is really, really handy. So if you want an even more comprehensive list, this is a great resource that I really recommend. Okay, but let's say you're more like, well, I like birds, but honestly, I just kind of want to chill in my space and I want something that's easy to maintain and, maybe looks a little bit more formal. Um, Classic shade garden area. It's a great space for relaxation, reflection. There's so many options here. You can consider hardscaping. You can consider unique shapes. You can be inspired by old cloister gardens, that are the old friars used to build, and they had these herb gardens in the middle of their abbeys, these cloister gardens that were pretty shady. But they, still managed to develop some beautiful things in there. Zen gardens, urban gardens, secret gardens, courtyard gardens. So there's a long history of kind of shady spaces that people have really made their own. And I encourage everybody to go do a little bit of research into them, see what you like, see what you don't like, and how you can bring those things into your space. And the other thing to think about is, limitations like a shady space can really make for a unique way to control a space as well. So in the UK, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the gardening schemes there, but one of the classic examples is the idea of various rooms. So they create rooms either by walls or hedges, and each garden kind of has its own essence. And one of my favorite styles is the white garden. So everything is planted that's planted flowers in white, and it can create this really, really beautiful sense of space that is just so serene, but so exciting at the same time. So, sometime my point is limitations can really be advantageous and allow us to create and control an area and create something really beautiful depending on what we want. So on the left here, I have an example of a white garden in the UK. This one obviously is not necessarily shady, but there are many, many white shady plants that you can find that will give you a similar effect. Um, The other thing is, we live in Northern California. I'm sure everybody here loves to go on a good hike. We love to go on a good hike through the redwood forest. And yet, when I tell people, well, have you ever considered, having more ferns in your shady area? They're like, well, it's boring. And, it's funny because we go to these places to see ferns in their native habitat, but then we kind of find it boring. And for me, my feeling is bring it with you, embrace that nature and bring it into your space and make ferns a part of your everyday life and remember their beauty all the time. You don't have to necessarily go to Hendy Woods or a redwood forest to remind you of how beautiful and serene it can be. The other thing that I think is great is if you can embrace a little bit of hardscaping and you want to do something like a green wall. So there are a lot of vining plants and crawling plants that will tolerate a lot of shade, including heavy shade, which makes sense because if you think about it, vining plants typically have to crawl up some other plant in nature to grow. And so they're naturally getting shade, whether it be from a tree or whatever they're growing on. And so you can create like a green wall, which is always really, really lovely and really, really beautiful in your space. Maybe part of the shade that you have is because you have a wall. So embrace that and make it into something that's living and beautiful and can create a backdrop for an outdoor table or outdoor seating. And there are a lot of flowering varieties, so that's another great option too. Embrace some statement elements. So you can also bring in some really lovely pots. Maybe if you have artwork or sculptures, you have a friend who's an artist who makes really lovely artwork. this is something that's really great to bring into a shady space and plant around and highlight the artwork that you want. And again, kind of bring in that sense of peace and tranquility. Here, I love this idea of kind of a hidden garden in the middle. A lot of people really like the idea of a Zen garden, but maybe you don't want to like fully have like a Japanese Zen garden. To me, this is something where you can bring in maybe some hardscaping elements mixed with your plants that can bring in that feeling without, but still feel California and still work in your space. Um, and then, you know, never underestimate the power of a hidden pergola. You can really have a lot of fun, um, with your friends, relaxing. Most people have tables out in the sun and then they find that they need an umbrella. But if you already have a shady space, you don't need an umbrella. So, um, you know, bring that in and think about those elements as well. The color garden. I think this is probably the biggest request that I get from people is how do I add color to my shady space? I really want to brighten it up. I really want to have those pops of color, and you absolutely can. You can have any color that you want, and you can make it as bright as you want. Do not be deterred by the shade factor. So I'll go through a lot of the plants that are options here. Astleby is one of my favorites. It comes in lots of colors. It has this like very beautiful plumey look that I personally love. Um, it's great to add vibrancy. It's great if you have like a Victorian or a cottage home that is colorful already and you want to like bring in those elements of color. And you can create your own really unique color schemes if that's what you're into. If you're somebody who's like, I love color, I love blues, I love pinks, and I want to bring them together, you can absolutely do that in a shade garden. Forget-me-nots here are blue, but there are a lot of other options. So I have a list here, but this is by no means everything. This is just, some highlights and some things that generally grow well in Northern California. Astrolabes, hostas. Hostas are great because they come in all different sizes. They come in many different colors. They come in all different leaf shapes. Some things do need a little bit more water, so I would check on that and just make sure, if you're somebody who wants something low water, some of these things might not work. But generally, they're a good choice. Hydrangeas as well. Who doesn't love a big, beautiful summertime hydrangea? Um, Great option. Azaleas, again, beautiful. Camellias, all different colors, any kind that you want. Alliums are really fun. Um, they're going to send up these beautiful, often like circular orb type flowers. They come in, again, all different colors, yellows, reds, whites, pinks, purples. And they're pretty easy to maintain. So, and you're going to get that seasonal color too, which is a lot of fun. The other thing is don't sleep on bulbs. Bulbs are great in a shady area. And there's so many different beautiful, beautiful bulbs. One of my favorites is Lily of the Valley, but there's also crocus, hyacinth, snowdrops, some tulips will tolerate some shade. And again, all of these come in a variety of different colors. They're easy to take care of. For the most part, you can leave them in the ground year round and they'll resprout every year. But again, do check on the variety because some do need to be pulled up and dried out a little bit. Ferns, ferns are lovely. I think people kind of feel that they're a little bit boring sometimes, but there are so many different types that you can get. Some might need a little bit more water in the summer, depending on the variety, but again, it's up to you and how much maintenance you want to do for those. Geraniums, coral bells. Coral bells come in really, really unique colors. Colas, let's see. Oh, and one of my favorites, I almost forgot. Hellebores I love because it's very hard to find green flowers. And hellebores come in all kinds of really interesting greens and greens mixed with a little red and whites and just really, really interesting, unique colors that you cannot find anywhere else. So they're a lot of fun. They're one of my favorites. Colis comes in like neon colors, which again can be really difficult to find. Hostas, I have some examples here of all the different colors that you can find. Foxgloves as well will tolerate shade. So if you're somebody who really wants that cottage feel, they come in all different types of colors. They're tall, they're beautiful, they really give you that summertime English garden feeling, which who doesn't love that? Alliums down in the bottom corner again can give you this really beautiful pop of color at various seasons and come up and give a lot of contrast. That ball is like such a nice form and shape. So you can have so much fun playing around with all of the colors that you want, as long as you're selecting the right plants for your soil and your moisture level and how much maintenance that you want to do. Um, and then this is just a quick tip on just general putting things together. You're like, okay, I have all of these beautiful plants, but how do I put them together in a way that looks lovely and works really well? And so I like to think about it as you want to have your stars, your kind of like key, your star actor in your play of your backyard. Um, what's the big impact that you want to make? And then you have your supporting cast that's really highlighting your stars, and then your background players that are maybe your like evergreens and your green tones that are going to highlight those stars and supporting cast in the background. Oh, yes. Okay. And then finally, I did promise some edibles for shade. And this is a question that I got the last time that I gave this talk, and I had almost forgotten that people do like to grow edibles for shade, and for a second I was thrown off. But then I remembered, has anybody ever been to Switzerland in the springtime? And has anybody ever had spurgle? Um, so I this is why I love the European gardening kind of just general feeling so much. So Spurgle is, I think they probably cost like $40 a plate if you're going to a restaurant in Switzerland and you're buying it, but it's white asparagus. And the way that they grow it is by putting asparagus in a box so that it gets no light and then it still grows because if you give it enough water and nutrients, it will still grow, but it just won't have a green color because it never got the sunlight to make the color green. And so the Swiss figured this out and they started growing it in darkness. And then they made it this like fancy treat that you can only get once a year, that's very expensive. So whenever you think you cannot grow any food in light without sunlight, you're incorrect. And the Swiss figured out a way to do it. I don't think a lot of people here probably want to grow spurgle, but there are a lot of other options for shady gardens. um, so the top contenders I have here in kind of some buckets. Brassicas generally are going to do pretty well with low light. So broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, cabbage, bok choy, collards, kale. All of these are pretty easy to grow, pretty low maintenance, and again are going to tolerate, maybe not full shade. I don't think most things will tolerate full shade, but if you have dappled light or you have only light during certain times of your day, you should be okay. They might not be huge, but you'll get something. Lettuces do very well even in a lot of shade, I found. So spinach, arugula, spring mixes. And the fun things about lettuce is there are so many fun, interesting varieties. There's like jaguar lettuce that has, it's like purple and red and has lots of fun colors. So you can really play around with these things and get things that you can't buy at your local grocery store, which is a lot of fun. And, it's always fun to look at the seed catalogs and find something exciting that you can't see at your grocery store and try it in your backyard. So the lettuces are always a fun, exciting one. And the brassicas too, there are all kinds of new varieties that you can get, or heirloom varieties if that's what you're into. Um, Herbs also, there are a lot of herbs that do really, really well. So you can have, even if you wanted just a small plant potter, a potted area for your plants, you don't have to have, full beds or anything. You can put dill, chives, parsley, lovage, which is kind of like a heritage herb that's really, really nutritious. It's kind of gone out of fashion in the past 80 years, I would say, but it's really nutritious and it will tolerate a shady environment. Tarragon as well, which, a lot of these things can be pretty expensive if you're buying them at the grocery store. So a shady area might be a great place for a little container gardening. Um, some alliums will work well too, leeks and ramps. Um, I'm currently growing leeks in a garden that I manage that's pretty shady and they're doing pretty well. Artichokes are great because they are perennial, so they will be there throughout the year. You don't need to replant them every year. You can start getting artichokes relatively quickly. And so, you don't have to worry about having like a fallow area for part of the year while you're waiting for something new to come in or space for something new. The artichokes will always be there and always be growing. Um, Celery, another one that can work pretty well. Some root vegetables, and again, I would just make sure that you're getting the right variety. Turnips work well, radishes, parsnips, beets. Some carrots will work. Just make sure they're ones that tolerate shade. There are different varieties that do. Some absolutely need full sun, so don't plant those, obviously. But most will have on the packet what sun they need and select those varieties. Peas also great. I love an fresh spring peas. There's nothing more delicious, and they will tolerate a lot of shade. Fava beans as well. Certain berries. There are a lot of California native berries that tolerate shade, but also blueberries are a really good one. And if you're worried about pesticides and things, it's really nice to have them in your backyard. Um, Sunchokes and Jerusalem artichokes. I did not realize that these were planted in a vegetable garden that I take care of. And I thought that they were flowers that somebody had planted before I started. And so I left them and I was redoing the beds for the next year and I found all of these sunchokes. And they were huge and they have done really well in almost complete shade. So sunchokes are a great one. It's hard to find them in the grocery store. They're really nutritious, full of fiber, delicious roasted. So that's a really, and again, they make a beautiful flower in the summertime, like really tall. They look like sunflowers. So they also add some visual interest to your garden. And finally, potatoes. Let's not forget the humble potato. You can literally grow it in a bag. If you have a big like coffee bag, you can put soil in it. You can grow your potatoes in there. They don't need a lot of sunlight. You know, so a lot of good options for your shady area. Do not be deterred. And then finally, just a little reminder to remember to embrace your space. So I was at Kew Gardens this summer, and they have a wonderful, wonderful vegetable growing program and they have rooms with different vegetables and different things in each room. And I could not believe that I had not thought of this previously, but they were growing a mushroom bed in one of the 100% shady areas of one of their rooms. And so again, there's always something that will grow in your shady area. Do not be deterred. Have a mushroom garden. You know, embrace it, learn what's going to work in your space, and it's really going to give back to you. There's always something that you can do and some plant that will work in your space. So, you just have to go out and find it. Um, so that's mostly what I have today. I think we probably have some questions at this point, and then I'll go over how you can contact Master Gardeners if you have any additional questions. We have a great hotline. We also have in-person hotline, so you can come in to Elkus Ranch on Mondays from 10 to 1, Thursdays from 1 to 4 at the Veterans Memorial Center in Redwood City. And we're also Fridays from 10:30 to 1:30 at the San Francisco Botanical Garden. One thing we do ask is don't actually bring in your plant to show us if you have something because we don't want any diseases getting tracked into any of these spaces. But you can also email us or call us with any of your gardening questions, and somebody will get back to you generally very quickly. We get a lot of questions of, I've had this tree for 10 years and all of a sudden it started dying, and send us some photos, send us some information, and we will get back to you and try to help you as quickly as we can. Um, so yeah, Ken, do we have any questions?
At this moment, we have no questions, but I just typed in via chat. Please send your questions here. So questions are now welcome. Um, we can address anything from the slides so far or things that we haven't addressed. So feel free to send them in. I'll give it about a couple minutes, I suppose. Uh,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, while we wait for any questions, we'd also just like to thank Lingso for helping us put this on. Again, my name is Rebecca Flato. You can, contact me also if you have any questions. And if you would like to stay informed about any of our Master Gardener things or follow us on social media, we have a monthly newsletter with lots of local information on gardening and additional talks. And if you'd like to donate, we also have a donation link.
Alrighty. So a couple questions came in here. Maybe we'll go in order here. Um, this attendee ordered some tuberose bulbs for spring, and they're wondering if those would work in a shade garden.
Tu tuberoses? Is that what you said?
Yes, yes.
So, I would say I'm not sure exactly what you ordered. Generally, the best way to know for sure is wherever you're ordering from, be sure to look at the packaging or what the label says, because that's going to be a lot better. There's so many different varieties at this point, especially a lot of the nursery plants. A lot of them are developed specifically for specific things. So it will be very, very different from plant variety to variety. So I would recommend whatever your packaging says, and if your packaging does not have that listed, that's a red flag and I wouldn't buy from that company. um, I would focus on what it says, and that's going to be the best way to decide. So I'll just go back to the top again. Your packaging should have one of these four things listed on it. um, of It should say full sun, part shade, part sun, or shade. And that's what I would go by to figure out to see if your specific plant actually fits. So, and then once you've figured out what your garden tolerates. So if you figured out that the average sunlight that the area you want to plant your tuberoses in, um, gets 3 to 6 hours of morning sun only, you know your part shade, and your label needs to say tolerates part shade or part shade to part sun or part shade to shade. And then that's the best way to know what's going to actually work.
Okay, so the next question is there a local place to buy supplies for edible mushroom gardening?
Oh, that is a good question. I I actually don't have a good one. So, I know there are a lot of places online. as master gardeners, we can't recommend you a specific place, but I can kind of guide you to what to look for. So again, you want to look for the vendors that are going to have the most information for you, um, and be able to provide you with very specific instructions and you know, you also want to look for certain quality things, making sure that they're sourcing where they're sourcing from, where they're getting things from. Um, there are, uh, I can't think of anywhere off the top of my head that's local, but there are a few good online resources that will ship you, the kind of soil that you need. If you need a specific type of soil, they will ship you certain, like some mushrooms like to grow on different types of wood chips. So they can provide you with the right type of wood chip that you might need in your area. They'll provide you with instructions. The one thing I would be careful about is, in the Northeast, people have gotten very into mushroom farming, and one mushroom in particular has gone kind of wild and is now becoming a bit invasive. So I would just make sure that whatever you choose to grow, there isn't a chance of it becoming invasive, or it's something native like chanterelles. Chanterelles are delicious. They grow native here. They're a great thing to try to grow in your shady area, and there are lots of places that have chanterelle kits and instructions. So I would look there first. Bullets as well grow here. Um, there are a few other really good ones. So I would look at those first, and then I would kind of find the places that can send you the spores or whatever it might be. And then, just make sure you're figuring out where they're sourced from so that they're, ethically sourced and they're pathogen free, that type of thing.
Wow, lots of mushroom questions.
Yeah, my ecology is a blooming field, literally.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, maybe we should do a mushroom talk, but let me just kind of summarize all these questions here. One of them is, what kind of soil will the mushroom grow in, and can you plant them in the ground as opposed to in containers? Um, and then will mushrooms do good under the trees?
So I'm not I, my ecology is not my home zone. I have a very high level knowledge about it, so I will give you my high level knowledge. But yes, they absolutely will grow under trees. In fact, that is their preferred habitat. Absolutely, it's where they grow in nature. So that's not a problem. What I have seen people do, and this I would do your research is what I would recommend. But I have seen people create sort of areas with wood, and then kind of create the mushroom bed within that under a tree. Mushrooms do not tolerate a lot of sunlight at all, so they do need shade. That again, in nature, they grow under trees, they grow in dark spaces, they need moisture. Um, and so if that's really, kind of your jam, I would do some additional research. I don't have enough knowledge to know the exact type of soils that you would need for the various mushrooms, but there is a lot of information out there now. Um, I do know that a lot of them require wood specifically. They need certain type of wood chips. But as to what type of wood each one needs, I couldn't tell you. So again, a lot of their mycology is huge, is exploding. One really good book that I recommend is What the Rain Brings. It's was written in the 70s, and it's a great book to just get started on local mushrooms to the area, what they look like, what they are, where they grow. And then as far as the actual growing, there are a lot of like newer places that are really delving into this. That I would look to them for more specific information on the actual soils and types of mushrooms that grow with things.
Okay, thank you so much. I think that's pretty much all the questions, mainly on mushrooms and growing them. We'll
Okay.
talk to the master gardener.
Sorry.
We can.
I threw in the mushrooms because I was looking through my photos and I was like, oh my God, like this is why didn't I think of this sooner? But I have not done this personally, so I can't give you a lot of information about it. But there is a lot of information to be had out there. So you know, try to find the reputable sources. And also, if you email the Master Gardener hotline, somebody will be able to do that research for you through credible sources. So that's a great way to find out a little bit more about mushrooms. Off the top of my head, I don't feel comfortable giving a lot of direction about this, but there are many master gardeners that would be happy to help if you call the hotline and give you more specifics.
Okay.
Um,
Well,
okay.
there was one resource, Mighty Cat Mushrooms and Paso Robles has kits. So someone shared a link there. So those who are wondering may want to click on that before we end the talk here. But the recording will be available on the website, hopefully by day after tomorrow. And any other questions? Feel free to send them in now. Otherwise, any closing summaries on your part?
No, thank you so much, everybody. And again, if you have any additional questions, I'll put up our um, hotline slide again. So, you know, email and uh, UC ANR, UC Master Gardeners, San Mateo and San Francisco counties, ask a Master Gardener. Um, if you think of anything, we will be waiting for you. But thank you so much to Lingso and thank you so much, Ken.
Thank you, Rebecca. That was a great talk. Lots of interest, and thanks, folks, for attending. And you can watch this recording in a couple of days at Link's website. Thanks, everybody. Bye bye.